Imagine this. Your stomach's growling after a long, exhausting day. You want something quick, cheap, and filling. You push your cart through Costco and head straight for the canned aisle. Towers of shiny cans wait to be tossed in. Be honest, what's the first one you grab? For most of us, it's tuna. It feels safe, simple, and affordable. It stretches a meal whether you stir it into pasta, make a quick sandwich, or bake a casserole. And the best part, you've always believed it's healthy, packed with protein. Something you can serve to your family without worry. But what if that trust is misplaced? What if that familiar can isn't always what it claims to be? Some tuna cans aren't just tuna. They hide fillers, additives, even risks that never make it to the front label. A hard truth when all you wanted was an honest meal. That's why we're here to pull back the lid. We'll uncover 5 Costco tuna products that aren't pure and reveal what real tuna looks like. Once you see the difference, you may never look at your pantry the same way again. Before we look at the problems, let's take a moment to understand what real tuna is supposed to be. If we don't know the standard, it's hard to see where companies fall short. The Food and Drug Administration sets the rules. Canned tuna must come from certain species: albacore, yellowfin, skipjack, bigeye, or bluefin. A small amount of salt is allowed. In its cleanest form, the label should list only 2 things: tuna and salt. Anything more is extra. Some companies add vegetable broth or soy. Others use a chemical called sodium acid pyrophosphate, which keeps harmless crystals from forming, but is still an additive. These extras are legal, but they move the product away from the idea of simple, real tuna. You must be wondering, what about oil-packed tuna? This is where many shoppers get confused. Oil pack is not fake. If the label clearly says tuna in olive oil and the ingredients match, that's an honest product. It isn't unsafe, but it also isn't 100% tuna, it's tuna plus oil. Think of it as a middle ground, not a problem, but not the pure standard either. Costco does carry cans that stick to the cleanest definition. Wild Planet Albacore lists only tuna and sea salt. Safe Catch Ahi Yellowfin does the same. These are examples of what pure looks like: short, clear labels, nothing hidden. Other cans go further. They use broth soy stabilizers or oils to stretch the fish. Once you compare, the difference is obvious. Some labels are short and simple, while others are crowded with ingredients you never expected in a can of tuna. So here's the question: are you ready? Then let's move forward and uncover 5 Costco tuna products that are not 100% tuna. 2. Chicken of the sea. The label says in water. That sounds clean. That sounds safe. Tuna and water, simple as it gets. But inside a can of chicken of the sea, chunk light tuna and water, that promise doesn't hold. Turn the can around and the truth is in the fine print: chunk light tuna, water, vegetable broth, salt, and hidden inside that broth, soy. This is not just tuna in water. It's tuna stretched with broth, mixed with extras, and carrying one of the most common allergens in the United States. Millions of Americans live with soy sensitivity. For them, one wrong sandwich could mean a serious reaction. Yet, most shoppers never expect to find soy in a can of tuna labeled in water. The broth isn't there to protect you. It's not there to improve the fish. It's there because broth is cheaper than tuna. By adding broth, the company lowers costs and sells you less fish while still printing in water on the front. It's a classic example of a label that looks honest at first glance but tells another story when you dig deeper. And the brand behind it is no small player. Chicken of the Sea has been in American kitchens for generations. Its mermaid mascot is as familiar as Campbell's soup or Kraft macaroni. Families bought it because it was affordable, reliable, and easy to trust. That's what makes the hidden broth feel less like a recipe choice and more like a broken promise. At Costco, the impact multiplies. This tuna doesn't sit on the shelf 1 can at a time. It comes in 12 packs, stacked high, inviting shoppers to stock up for weeks or months. Buying in bulk is built on trust. You assume the warehouse has already done the vetting. You assume the front label matches the truth inside. Few people will stop to comb through the ingredient panel on every pack. Yet the details matter. Soy is not harmless to everyone. Vegetable broth is not what most of us picture when we read in water. And once that trust is bent, it's hard to snap back. To be clear, this tuna isn't poison. If you don't have a soy allergy, it won't harm you. But that's not the point. The point is honesty. If a can says in water, it should mean tuna and water. Not fillers, not hidden allergens, not quiet shortcuts to save a few cents per can. This is how profit engineering looks on a dinner plate. A brand trims costs by stretching the fish, and the shopper pays the same price expecting a pure product. The difference isn't obvious until you read the fine print, and most people never do. That's why Chicken of the Sea Chunk Light in Water takes the first spot on our list. It shows how quickly a trusted name can drift away from its promise. And Chicken of the Sea isn't the only familiar name with a hidden recipe. Another brand on Costco's shelves pulls the very same trick. 3. Bumblebee. Bumblebee solid white albacore in water feels like the premium pick. The front says solid white, the words in water make it sound clean. For most shoppers, that reads as tuna and water, nothing more. But turn the can around and you'll find something different. Many versions list vegetable broth soy, and sometimes even a chemical additive. The first promise already cracks. And the deeper truth is that this isn't just one brand slipping, it's how the system works. Albacore is not a cheap fish. It is caught wild in open waters. The price jumps with fuel costs, catch limits, and season changes. A cannery pays for every step: the fish, the workers, the cans, and lids, the freight, the energy needed to cook and seal each batch. When margins get tight, there's one lever that changes the math: fast add broth. Think about it with real numbers. A 6-ounce can of pure albacore might cost 30 cents more to fill than a can stretched with broth. That does not sound like much. But if you sell 10 million cans in a year, those 30 cents add up to $3 million saved. Sell by the case at Costco, and the numbers climb even higher. That's why broth shows up. Not to make your can healthier, not to make it safer, just to make the math easier. And when you see it in bulk, the system is even clearer. Costco does not sell a single can. It sells sleeves of 8 or 12. The warehouse needs steady supply, stable prices, and cans that look uniform. A little broth smooths out the differences in texture after cooking. A chemical keeps harmless crystals from forming so the fish looks perfect on the shelf. These steps are legal, but they move the product away from the idea of simple, real tuna. There is also the health piece. Albacore carries more mercury than light or skipjack tuna. Federal advice says it's fine in moderation, but older adults, children, and pregnant women are told to limit how often they eat it. That doesn't mean albacore is poison. It does mean the label should be honest so shoppers know exactly what they are buying. The profits explain the choice. A few cents saved per can turn into millions across the brand. A label with only tuna and salt is possible. It demands better raw fish and tighter controls. That also means a higher price on the shelf. In a market where the big 3 brands fight for contracts and shelf space shortcuts win. And remember, Bumblebee isn't new to this kind of pressure. The company was caught in a price-fixing scheme a few years ago. Executives faced charges. Millions in fines were paid. That history shows a pattern: when margins tighten, the company looks for ways to keep its numbers up. Sometimes it's coordination. Sometimes it's fillers. Either way, the shopper pays. So what should you do? Read the ingredient list. If you see vegetable broth, that's not just water. If you see soy and someone in your family is sensitive, that's a hidden risk. If you want the cleanest option, look for labels that list only tuna and salt. They exist, but they are not always the ones stacked tallest at the warehouse. This is not about blaming one can. It's about seeing the system behind the label. Bumblebee sells a premium image with albacore. Then it protects the margin with broth and additives. That gap between words and contents is the system at work, and it does not stop here, because even the hometown label at Costco leans on additives to keep cans looking perfect. Let's open Kirkland next. 4. Kirkland Signature. Costco's Kirkland Signature brand carries weight. For many members, it's the label you reach for when you want quality at a fair price. You trust that if Costco puts its own name on the can, it must be safe, honest, and straightforward. That's why this next can stings. Kirkland Signature solid white albacore in water sounds simple, just tuna and water. But look at the ingredients: albacore, tuna, water, salt, and sodium acid pyrophosphate. That last one is not fish. It is not water. It is not salt. It is a chemical additive. The industry calls it sap, and it is added not to make your food healthier, but to solve a cosmetic problem. Here's the backstory. When tuna is sealed and cooked at high heat, it sometimes forms natural crystals called struvite. These crystals are harmless, but they look sharp, almost like glass. Shoppers who spot them often panic, thinking shards of glass slipped inside the can. To head off complaints, companies add sodium acid pyrophosphate. The additive keeps crystals from forming, and the tuna looks cleaner. On paper, this is legal and approved by the Food and Drug Administration. But here's the consequence: phosphate additives add phosphorus to your diet. Doctors often warn people with kidney disease, bone weakness, or certain heart conditions to watch their phosphorus intake. Many older adults fall into those categories. For them, a steady diet of canned foods with added phosphates could make health management harder. Now imagine someone who trusts the Kirkland label, someone who is careful with their budget and buys a full sleeve of cans. They make tuna salad for lunch all week. They keep eating it because it seems safe. After all, it's Costco's own brand. But if that person has kidney trouble or needs to limit phosphorus, those hidden additives could quietly add strain. It's not a one-time danger. It's the slow buildup that matters. And this isn't rare. Phosphate additives show up in processed meats, frozen meals, and yes, canned fish across the country. It is part of the system. The same Kirkland label that makes you feel secure can carry the very same shortcuts used by national brands. Now, should we turn anger on the companies? Not necessarily. Costco and its suppliers operate on a huge scale. They need cans that look perfect, that ship well, that sell by the pallet. They face cost swings from fuel fish markets and supply shortages. Using additives is one way they manage those pressures. That does not make it the best choice for your family, but it explains why it happens. So where does that leave you? Right back at the shelf making choices. If you or someone in your home is managing kidney health, bone health, or simply trying to avoid extra additives, this label matters. You may decide Kirkland's version is not the right fit. That does not mean Costco fooled you. The label does list the additive. The real risk is missing it. The fine print is small, and most of us shop in a hurry. We toss a case into the cart because we trust the big words on the front and water. That's why this can is a reminder. Don't just rely on the front. Flip it around, read what's really inside. Because once you know the pattern, you'll see it everywhere. Additives like sap are not rare. They are woven into the modern food system. The best defense is not outrage, it's awareness. Decide what matters most for your household. If you want pure tuna, look for labels that list only tuna and salt. If you need to avoid phosphorus, skip any can with pyrophosphate. Those choices are yours, and they matter more than the marketing words. Kirkland shows us that even a trusted house label can lean on chemistry to keep cans looking perfect. That's one kind of shortcut. But the story doesn't stop with water-packed tuna. The next can looks richer, dressed in olive oil, yet hides problems of its own. 5. Genova. Genova catches the eye in a different way than most cans. Deep green label, Italian flair, olive oil printed in bold letters. It looks premium, as if you are bringing home a piece of Mediterranean tradition. But here's where the story bends. Real imported Italian tuna is not just about the word olive oil on the front. If you walk into a specialty Italian grocery, you'll see it packed in glass jars or metal tins with clean, bold wording Lavorato in Italia, packed in Italy, sometimes even with the fishing area listed. The fish inside is often firm, whole fillets laid neatly and hand-packed. The ingredient list is short tuna, olive oil, sea salt. The price tells the same story. These jars cost more because they carry the weight of small-scale work and direct origin. Genova, on the other hand, is not small batch Italy. It is a brand under Thai Union, the same global seafood group behind Chicken of the Sea. The styling on the label leans Italian, but the fish itself can be sourced from multiple regions. It is a mass-market tuna dressed in Mediterranean clothes. That does not make it illegal. It does not mean the can is unsafe. But it does mean the image on the front oversells the story inside. That brings us to the health side, where the risks are not about hidden chemicals, but about the basics: calories, fat, and sodium. A drained 5-ounce serving of Genova yellowfin in olive oil carries about 210 calories with roughly 11 grams of fat. That is nearly double the calories and fat of the same size compact in water. Even if you drain it well, the oil soaks into the flesh. For someone managing weight, cholesterol, or heart health, those extra calories add up. 2 cans a week over a month adds close to 1,000 extra calories compared to water-packed tuna. The sodium line is another concern. Each can has around 500 milligrams of sodium, more than 1/5 of the daily recommended limit for an average adult. For older adults watching blood pressure or heart disease, that number is not small. It is one thing to have it once in a while. But when Costco sells it by the case, the steady diet builds quickly. Now some people might say olive oil is healthy, and it is in moderation. But when it is locked into a can with fish and salt, the numbers can tip fast. If your doctor has told you to watch fat or sodium, the oil-packed option is not your safest choice. The label says olive oil. The numbers tell a fuller story. And there's another point worth noting: recalls. In February of this year, Tri-Union, the parent company, recalled certain cans including Genova solid white tuna in olive oil because of defective pull-tab lids. The issue was a risk that the seal could fail, which could lead to spoilage or contamination. That does not mean every can is dangerous, but it shows that even products dressed as premium are not immune to the same manufacturing issues that hit cheaper brands. A shiny Italian-styled label does not protect you from the reality of mass production. So what does this all mean for you? If you're chasing flavor and don't mind the calories, Genova can serve its purpose. Olive oil does add richness. But if you're managing weight, blood pressure, or cholesterol, this may not be the right fit. And if you thought you were buying a piece of authentic Italian heritage, you are not. True Italian tuna is clearly labeled, often hand-packed, often pricier and easy to spot. If you know the sign's origin on the label, simple ingredients, whole fillets, and often a glass jar. Genova shows how an Italian look can hide a very different reality inside the can. But labels and style are only one way the story bends. Sometimes the problem isn't about extra broth chemicals or even calories. It's about the fish itself, what you see and taste the moment you open the lid. That brings us to StarKist, the biggest tuna name in America. For this last stop, we're not talking about marketing tricks or imported images. We're talking about something more basic. When the can says solid white, does it really give you solid fish? When you pay for tuna, are you getting the quality you deserve? StarKist. 3 parts per billion of BPA, 500 milligrams of sodium, fewer ounces than the label promised. You don't need a microscope to see the problem. StarKist cans leave a paper trail of numbers that tell a very different story from the bright label on the front. You pay for solid white albacore expecting firm chunks you can lift with a fork. Instead, too often what spills out is mush sitting in a pool of water. Not spoiled, not dangerous, but not what you thought you were buying either. It's a small letdown that multiplies when you plan a sandwich, a casserole, or a salad, and the texture just won't hold. And you are not alone. Shoppers all over the country have shared the same frustration, solid white that looks more like flakes cans that feel watered down. The fine print makes the gap wider. Turn some of those in water cans around, and the label doesn't stop at tuna and water. You'll find vegetable broth mixed in. Sometimes you'll see sodium acid pyrophosphate, a chemical added to manage texture during processing. StarKist says their broth today uses vegetables like potato or carrot, not soy, but it doesn't change the point. If the front says in water, the back shouldn't surprise you with broth or additives. Yet it does. Chemicals don't stop there. Independent tests from Consumer Reports found measurable levels of BPA bisphenol A in StarKist canned tuna. Their chunk-like cans averaged about 3 parts per billion. That's well below government limits, but it's not zero. If you eat a lot of canned goods, or if you're someone trying to limit chemical exposure because of age or health, even those tiny amounts matter. StarKist's pouches, on the other hand, tested clean. That's useful to know, but it shows again how the container itself can quietly change what you're putting into your body. And then comes the underfill case, the one that hit headlines a few years back. Customers noticed 5-ounce cans that weren't living up to their label. A class action suit followed. StarKist ended up agreeing to a settlement that offered families either $25 in cash or $50 in vouchers, with millions paid out in total. Imagine how many underweight cans it took for the company to write checks like that. For regular buyers, it meant wasted dollars week after week until someone proved the shortfall in court. Mercury is the last piece, and it's not unique to StarKist, it's about tuna itself. Albacore carries more mercury than chunk light. Federal advice tells pregnant women, children, and older adults to limit how often they eat it. StarKist meets the official limits, but that doesn't erase the reality: eat albacore often enough and you're stacking up mercury. That's a warning worth keeping in mind if tuna is a regular protein in your diet. Now put yourself in the shoes of a regular shopper. You walk into Costco or the grocery store and the math is simple. Tuna is affordable. A case goes a long way. You buy a flat of cans for quick lunches, thinking it's the same safe staple you grew up with. Week 1, you make a tuna melt and the filling turns watery. Week 2, you happen to glance at the ingredients and see vegetable broth where you expected plain water. Week 3, a friend mentions the underfill lawsuit, and you realize you might have been paying for ounces you never got. None of these are dramatic moments. No trip to the ER. But together, they chip away at trust. And trust is the real currency in a pantry staple. This is the consequence that doesn't make it onto the label. Not poison, not fraud in the courtroom sense, but steady disappointments that change how you feel about a brand. The can promises solid white, but what you spoon out doesn't live up. The front says in water, but the back tucks in broth and additives. The price looks low until you think about underfills and years of price-fixing scandals that made families pay more than they should. Here's the truth, StarKist still fills shelves, still sells millions of cans. But the can you remember may not be the can you open today. That doesn't mean you need to stop eating tuna. It means you need to read the back, not just the front. It means if you want firm chunks, you may need to look for brands that list only tuna and salt. If you're watching BPA, maybe switch to pouches when the price makes sense. If you eat tuna, often consider chunk light instead of albacore to keep mercury lower. None of this is about scaring you off fish. It's about keeping the picture honest. Because quality is not just about taste, it's about truth. And when a brand chips away at truth, one watery can at a time, that's a loss worth talking about. We've opened the cans together one by one. We've seen broth where there should be water chemicals, where there should be salt, and mush where there should be firm fish. But we've also seen the pattern why companies make these choices. It isn't always greed for greed's sake. Sometimes it's just survival in a marketplace that squeezes every margin. That doesn't excuse it, it does explain it, and it leaves the last move in our hands. Not theirs, ours. Because not one of these cans is pure fraud. They're not glass shards hidden in food. They're shortcuts, broth to stretch oil, to boost flavor, additives to calm complaints. Small moves that ripple out until they land in our kitchens, on our plates, and our families. So what do? We slow down. We know our health, our limits, our family's needs. And we buy with care, not just for ourselves, but for the kind of food system we want to keep alive. In the end, this story is bigger than tuna. It's about the meals we trust and the promises we let slide, and those choices, quiet as they seem, shape all of us.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.